Hey, welcome back to the Stress Sisters podcast. This is the podcast where powerhouse women come to stop drowning in stress, stop drowning in chaos and craziness, and just start feeling like themselves again. I'm Jess. This is my co host, Melissa. Today, she thinks she's Celine Dion holding on to her microphone. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see it. If not, you just have to take my word for it. Why are you holding on to your microphone?
Well, 10 minutes before we started recording this, I like tried because my mic is on a rig, like it's on attached to my desk, and there's like an arm that like comes out and then retracts,
A
so that I can
rig.
a rig, yeah, like a podcast arm, like a mic arm, podcast. I don't know what it's called. I don't know what it's called.
Wow.
Anyways, it's a thing. And my microphone was always attached to it, and I went to go like just pull it like I normally do, and the whole thing just broke. And I don't understand how something this expensive can actually break. I mean, I've only had it for like a year, 2 years.
That's really poor. Is
It's a
it the
Rode
actual
mic too.
microphone itself or the rig broke? The rig broke or the microphone
No,
broke?
the actual microphone part broke. However, I posted a picture of it on our Instagram story, and then Justin messaged me, and he was just like, "How hard did you pull that thing?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I might have been in a little bit of a rush trying to get it set up before we started recording, and then I forgot to charge my batteries from like my camera, so it was kind of like I did yank it, but like I feel like I always do yank it. That's what she
Wow.
said. I always yank it in the same way." And so maybe it was just kind of like wear and tear over time for the past 2 years of yanking.
Gotta ease up on the yanking, man. Like, ease up on that power grip.
Literally
Oh
crying
my
tears.
gosh. Yeah, let go of the yanking. Actually, that's a good segue into today's episode because today we're going to be talking about almost kind of exactly things like this, letting go of the things that you can't control. So, bad things that happen, people that piss you off, events that are pissing you off. How do you let go of all of the things that you can't control? And how do you redirect that energy into something that's actually serving you? Because if you're being honest with yourself, how much of your stress comes from trying to micromanage every little thing? Like, I'm going to answer that for you. It's a lot. I would say probably 90% of my stress came from this, like trying to control and micromanage people and things that I had no business micromanaging.
Oh, I mean, 100%. I like my middle name is micromanage, Melissa micromanage Randall. Okay. And if you are listening to this thinking, okay, I hear you guys, but like I have to control things or everything will fall apart, like I get it. Completely get it. I have been there. Jess has been there. But today, we're going to give you some powerful tools to shift that mindset and free up a lot of that mental and emotional energy, because the truth is trying to control everything is it's like carrying around a backpack full of rocks that aren't even yours, right? Like you're just like everything is in there and you're just like, well, I just have to be the person to carry this damn backpack. And I think about whenever we've gone like a family hike, like I never want like mom and dad to carry everything, so I'm like, I'll take the bag, let me have the bag, dad. Like I'll just like you and I always do that of like, let me take it from Joe, take it from Rico, like and then we are like pack mules trying to
Yeah.
carry everything, and like it's just exhausting. So today we want to unpack that and give you, like I said, those tools to be able to let the backpack go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way to look at it. Let the backpack go. I think about that like our last hike in October when, we went for your birthday and it wasn't like a strenuous hike, but we are going and it's a little bit warmer than you anticipate it to be and you're like that quarter zip's getting a little hot. It was cute. It's a little bit too hot right now and the backpack's starting to make you sweaty and a little bit more out of breath than you should be. And it's such a good analogy because that is exactly what happens, right? It does make you feel more tired. It does kind of slow you down. It does weigh you down. And when I think about why this happens, right? As women, we we have a lot of stress that comes from feeling responsible for everything, right? Like all of the things, even things that aren't in our control. But instead of like taking a moment to acknowledge I don't need to feel responsible for all of these things, most of us are just kind of powering through life without even stopping to consider, well, Like, what is actually in my control? But when you take a pause, when you take a beat and you stop and you ask yourself that question, right? What is actually in my control? You do find that it comes down to basically three things. Number one, your actions. Number two, your mindset. And number three, your effort. Like, that is it. That's all that you can truly control. You cannot control other people's actions or their reactions or their thoughts. You cannot control the past or the economy or who's elected as president or, whether it rains on your wedding day. Shout out to Alanis Morissette, right? But you can control how you respond to these things. You can control what you focus on, and you can control where you put your attention and your energy.
Yeah, and so many of us waste our precious time and energy and mental space on all the things that we literally can't change, that we have zero control over, right? And I mean, this was me to a T. Like I said, my middle name is micromanage Randall. Like I for the past 4 years, I have been living in Dallas. I'm from Connecticut. Okay. I've always lived in the Northeast, lived in New York City for 6 years. And so I moved to Dallas with Enrico about 4 years ago. And it was like fine, at first, like since we've been here, but I was always like, okay, but like we're gonna be going back to the Northeast eventually. Like this is not happening long term. And he was really resistant to it, like really, really, really resistant. He's not from the Northeast at all. He's from Chicago. So Midwesterners, go you. Um, but like, he lived in New York, so like he gets it. But it was just like I don't have that like that insane drive and like pull. Like if you're from the Northeast, like like that's the best place on the planet, so like you have to get back there. And so for like 3 years, I was like really, really, really difficult in trying to micromanage like the things that he likes. And like every time we would travel back there to, visit family, I would be like, do you love it? Do you like it? Like, isn't this place so beautiful? Like, oh
Say
my
you
God, like
love it.
say you love the houses, say you love the shops, say you love it. Like I was like, it was really bad. And then even like being here and like living here, like everything I was like, ugh, like the sushi is not good like it is in New York. This is not New York sushi. The pizza sucks. And so I was really, really trying to micromanage the whole outcome. And it was a really big point of contention for us. Like we like argued about it frequently. And I was very cranky frequently because of it. Anyways, spoiler alert, we are moving back in a couple of months. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The point was at some point I said, okay, I need to release this and let it go and let him come to the conclusion, because clearly the way that I'm approaching this is not working. So I need to let him decide, like, does he like it? Would he be comfortable living there? And eventually he did come to me and he said, hey, I think I'm ready to move back to New York, to the Northeast. So like I spent 3 years being frustrated, being on edge, being snappy, being irritable, like trying to control the whole situation, when in reality, when I just took a step back, that's when everything really changed. And to be honest with you, like once that happened, it never really occurred to me that I truly didn't have, you know, control over that. I just tried so hard to keep forcing it. And it was like I truly believe that, if I just like worried enough or forced things more, like the outcome that I wanted would just happen. I never considered that the outcome was actually not fully in my control. Like I can't control what he likes, deep down or doesn't like. So if you are like me and you're having a hard time letting go whatever it is that you are holding on to, that's consuming all of your mental energy, you're in the right place. And I want to share a few tools with you that Jess and I used to release this micromanager habit. Okay, so the first tool you're going to use to help you hone your focus and determine what you can and cannot control is what we call the 2-column method. Okay, so what I want you to do is grab 2 pieces of paper. On the first piece of paper, I want you to just brain dump and write down everything that's stressing you out. It can be, your parents' health if you're concerned about that. It can be, taxes that are coming up. It can be your boss's mood. Or it can even be something dumb like my husband didn't load the dishwasher the right way and it pissed me off and like he keeps doing it. Okay, so that's on one piece of paper. Okay, on the second piece of paper, I want you to draw a line straight down the middle to make two columns. Okay, in the first column, you're going to write within my control. And then the second column at the top, you're going to write not within my control. And then what I want you to do is go back to that first piece of paper and look at all the stuff that you wrote down that stressed you out. And I want you to start to categorize it under each of those columns. Okay, so the things that are actually within your control, and then the things that are not in your control. For all the stuff that's out of your hands, those are the things that you have to work on letting go.
Honestly, I love this exercise and I find it so helpful because when you are living in that heightened anxious state, right? Like what you were talking about of like just desperately wanting Rico to like love Connecticut and love the Northeast and wanting to move back. Like when you're trying to control and micromanage everything, it can feel really stressful. It can feel chaotic. It can feel like all consuming. And when you are feeling this way, I want you to kind of think about it's almost like your brain is this really messy room, right? So think of like the messiest room in your house. Like there's your kids' toys or your dog's toys and your clothes and shoes and books and papers and mail, like everything's scattered everywhere, right? And it's kind of like all of those thoughts and worries and ideas that are just swirling around in your head right now. And when your brain gets cluttered like this, it's really hard to focus, right? So instead of ever feeling like you're just chilled or relaxed, you are constantly worrying, you are constantly feeling anxious, you're constantly getting frustrated and feeling angry, right? And then it's like what you said earlier, Melissa, because, everything is feeling so out of control, you almost default to that way of thinking where it's like, well, if I can just lock in with more control, if I can just dig in harder, that's going to fix everything. That's going to force the outcome that I want. But the truth is that you can't, and it just makes things worse. And that's one of the reasons why this 2-column method, like this tool, it's so powerful because if we go back to the messy room analogy, right? Writing things down on a piece of paper instead of storing it in your brain, it's kind of like, grabbing the biggest laundry basket that you can find and going into this messy room and scooping all of the stuff off the floor, right? It doesn't mean that the mess is gone because you still have this laundry basket that's full of shoes and papers and books and all of that, but it moves the mess out of the way. That way you can see the floor again and you can think a little bit more clearly, right? So when you're writing all of the things down that you're worried about, the first thing that you're really doing, you're offloading mental clutter, right? Your brain can only hold so much information at once. Like if you think about like a computer or your phone, right? It has limited memory. So, or like limited storage. So if you're writing things down, it moves those thoughts from your brain onto paper. So, number one, like you're freeing up a little bit of mental space and energy. Okay. The second thing you're doing by writing things down, you're calming your emotional brain. Okay. So, when you're really stressed, trying to control and micromanage everything, your amygdala, that's the part of your brain that controls things like fear and emotions, your amygdala becomes super active, right? It just like goes haywire. So, when you're writing things down, you're basically telling your brain like, hey, I'm handling this, and it can start to relax. Okay. So that's why the 2-column tool, it's a really powerful first step. But you said something earlier, Melissa, and I want to call it out because you were saying about, you have to make the 2 columns and you have to categorize all of your worries and, into things that are within your control and things that are not in your control. And then you said, for all the stuff that's out of your hands, that all the stuff that's, not in your control, that's the stuff that you have to let go. And that sounds great in theory. But if you said that to me 18 months ago, I would have been like, no shit, Melissa. Like, why didn't I think of that? Just let it go. Yeah, of course. Duh. Like, thanks for pointing out the obvious, right? So if someone's listening to this, they're like, well, obviously, Melissa, if I were able to let it go, I would, but I can't. That's why I'm here. What would you say to them?
Ooh, not sure I can actually say out loud what I would say because I don't want to get us canceled. Also, can't say what my actions would be because then that would be threatening and probably get taken down. So it just, I mean, Listen, the reality is the two column exercise, it's just your starting point. Like you have to start somewhere. You can't go from being a crazy control freak micromanager to all of a sudden like poof, just because you listen to this episode, like you're not, right? So you have to start somewhere. So the two column exercise is literally your starting point. Okay, now you have a clear list of things that you can control and the things that you cannot control. Like Jess said, I love that analogy of it's like that messy room of like there's things on your floor, right? But you're just like we're not full, it's not gone, but we're kind of organizing it in its own little more like tidy mess. Okay. Now, what I want to do from here is introduce the second tool in this whole exercise, and we call it the ownership shift. And this is what's going to actively help you let go of the stuff that you can't control. Okay. So when you use this ownership shift, you're moving from reaction mode to ownership mode. And instead of spiraling about things you can't control, you're going to ask yourself one simple question: what can I do about this right now? And here's why this is so powerful. A lot of us sit in frustration, whether it's about a toxic work environment or a partner who won't change or even world events. And we let all of those things drain us, even though we have no control over it. But when you shift to ownership mode, it lets you reclaim your power. Your brain is wired to focus on and search for more evidence to back up whatever you feed it. Okay, so if you're constantly focused on what's wrong, well, your brain will keep looking for and finding more problems. It's what we call your reticular activating system, or your RAS. Okay, so the RAS, it's like a filter for your brain that decides, what information gets your attention. It can't process everything around you. So it prioritizes what you focus on. If you're constantly thinking things are going wrong, your RAS tunes into anything that supports that belief. So maybe it's a missed deadline, or a rude coworker, or your messy house. It's like your brain is saying, got it. You think life is stressful, so let me show you all the proof. And I'll give you a real life example of this. I had I started to get like dry eyes last spring, and I it was like kind of new. Like I had it for like a week, like 2 years prior, and then it just like went away. And I had gone to see a doctor who, like, when I think about it, it just really, really bothers me because she really tried to scare me into like there being really something wrong, and how I have to spend all this money to get this procedure done, to otherwise it's just going to get like worse, yada yada yada. And like I it put me into a full-blown panic mode. I'm like, oh my god, like I'm gonna live with this the rest of my life. This is never gonna go away, like unless I get this, and how am I gonna come up with $4,000? And it was really stressful. every Everywhere I went, everything that was on TV, all I heard was vision or eyes, or like it didn't matter. I was like, oh my God, it's a sign. Oh my God, it's a sign. Oh my God, it's a sign. Like that is your RAS, like doing its job. It was literally, I was on such high alert that it was literally searching for any proof to back up that I'm doomed. Okay. So I just really like that. That's just an exaggerated example. I'm fine now, but that's just proof of how your RAS works. Okay. Now, when you use the ownership shift and you move your focus to, okay, what's one thing I can do about this right now? You're essentially giving your RAS a new search term. So now instead of scanning for problems, your brain starts looking for opportunities and small wins and even solutions. So it's not that the problems disappear, it's just that they don't get top priority anymore. Okay? And I want you to think about it like adjusting the settings on your GPS. If you set the settings to what's wrong, it'll route you through frustration and dead ends, right? But if you change it to what's my next step, it's going to route you towards progress. So if you shift your focus, then essentially you shift your experience.
Oh, that is so good, man. Like I love this one because understanding how your brain works, it's just so cool, right? Like when you start being like, "Oh wow, that's really crazy that there is this whole system that like creates this feedback loop and almost shapes my reality." And I remember when, I first learned about this, I was pretty blown away. And one of the things that stuck out to me, it was like, well, so I can go through life experiencing all of the same stressors, but the way in which I experience them or the way in which I perceive them or let them affect me, it could be totally different if I shifted my focus from being like problem oriented to solution oriented. And that was something that was really cool. And once I actually started practicing that, it was like this switch flipped, and it helped me to move out of almost like being stuck in that victim mode and more into ownership mode. Like, okay, I got this. Like life really isn't that bad. I do have agency. But I'm like the hole poker today. I'm gonna poke holes in
You
everything. You know what
are
I mean?
always the whole poker, Jessica.
I
That
love
is
it.
your middle name.
Jessica Hole Poker Randall.
Yeah.
Oh
You
my
love
God.
hole poking and you love caveats.
I love caveats and hole poking. Yeah, you're right. It's my
I
game.
know.
Um, being honest, and if we're like, I am poking a hole right now. You're saying like make the shift into ownership mode, right? And that's great. But making that shift, it is really tough and it takes practice. And if you are new to using ownership, like that ownership shift, that ownership mode, it can feel a little bit like challenging, or you might feel a little bit unsure of like how to do it at first. Okay. So, one thing that I want to do is talk about a couple of real life examples. That way, anyone who's listening can get a better idea of what we actually mean here. Right. So, most of the women that are listening to this podcast, they work in a, business setting, or they own their own business. They have a side hustle, you're in a work setting. And this example is like really top of mind for me because, I have a lot of clients right now who are really feeling this, So in a work setting, we'll give an example of, how to use like the 2-column tool and the ownership shift. That way you can get a real life example of like, how do I actually put this into practice? Okay. So let's say your company is restructuring, right? And you're like, layoffs are coming. You're worried about your role. I know, again, this is a hot topic right now with all the layoffs that are going on. I have a bunch of clients who are, feeling the impact of it. It's impacting their mood and their sleep and their focus. And like, they're snapping at everything. They're just not feeling great. So this could be relevant for a lot of people. If we are using the 2-column tool here, right? We have to put this one, my company is restructuring, in the category of things that I cannot control, right? But using the ownership shift and asking the question, what can I do about this right now? Well, that changes the focus because no, you cannot control the decisions that leadership makes, but you can control the actions you take. You can control how you prepare, right? So, ownership shift here, what can I do about this right now? Well, you can update your LinkedIn profile. You can update your resume. You can attend more networking events. You can focus on skills and acquiring skills that make you more of an asset, right? Do you see that shift? Like instead of spiraling into stress that, oh my God, I can't control this. And what if I lose my job and all of that? You're redirecting your energy into something that's actually actionable and things that are going to serve you.
I love that one. And I think, things like that that happen in your career, at work, it's so relevant for so many women who are listening to this. Because like I said, whether it's the restructuring, whether it's, your boss's mood or your coworker who's just like not a nice person to you and that really sets you off, like this is going to be such a good exercise to be able to apply to those things that are happening in the workspace. But like we said in the beginning, this isn't just for work. Like you're a human being, like you're not just, a businesswoman. And so you can also apply this, let's say, to your relationship. So let's say, you're feeling frustrated because your spouse isn't as communicative or supportive as you'd like them to be right now. Maybe, they're really stressed with work. Maybe they're distracted, or maybe they're just not showing up emotionally the way that you need. It's easy for this to create tension naturally, right? And I see this come up, when stress runs high in relationships. So let's pull out this 2-column tool and look at how we can use it in this scenario. So, can you control how your spouse behaves? No, you can't. And I think that's where a lot of women go wrong, because you think that you can, mom, but you can't. Like, you can't actually control how they behave. They are in charge of their emotions and their actions. Okay, so
Mom, though, mom's the exception. Mom literally has dad on lock.
that's
Actually,
true.
when she does what she doesn't. He's also wild. I don't know. Yeah,
But this is the problem. It's a perfect example because
yeah.
she does in her head, she thinks she does, but really she doesn't, because dad keeps doing the same shit he's always done. Right. So again, like that goes straight into the things I cannot control column. Okay. But here's where the ownership shift comes in, mom. Instead of staying stuck in frustration, you ask yourself, what can I do about this right now? Well, you can control how you communicate your needs. You can calmly express how you're feeling and what kind of support would help you. You can also take care of yourself, like do your own self care practices, reach out to friends or family for support, or even, suggest blocking out couples time on the calendar and being intentional about connecting instead of sitting there and pouting that, every single night your partner is on their phone and they're not giving you any time. Have you even tried to communicate, hey, I don't like this. Can we maybe even pick one night out of the week to put our phones down after 8 o'clock? Right? Like, see how that works. You can't force someone to show up the way that you want, but you can shift your energy toward healthy, productive actions that serve you and that serve the relationship.
That is so good. And that was such a game changer in my own marriage and my own relationship, right? Like learning that I am not responsible for, nor can I control how my spouse shows up, right? But like you, I think my second middle name was also micromanager because that was what I did, right? Like I spiraled about like how he acted and the things that he did and what he used his time for. And it was not productive at all. So instead of spiraling and being salty about it and playing the victim, when I learned about that ownership shift and I moved into ownership mode, well, it put the onus back on me, right? It took me out of victim mode and it forced me to have to be brave and be vocal about communicating what I need and what I expected in our relationship, right? And before that, I didn't. I was just like, well, if I just try to control what you do, then I don't have to say anything. But when we made that shift, it was like, I don't have control over what you do, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I need. And it gave, my spouse the opportunity to either show up or not show up. And when I did that, it really changed everything for the better. And I love both of these, like the work example and the relationship example, because, they both show you that you can control your actions. You always have the ability to control your actions, even when there's this person or this entity outside of you that you don't have any control over. But I'm going to poke another hole because this is like, it's going to be something that's like an important. I think it's something that's relevant for a lot of women. What if you are looking at things and you're like, well, the thing that I want to control is me, right? Or part of me. So let's say, I mean, we've both experienced this before, right? Let's say you're feeling frustrated with your body. Maybe your clothes don't fit the way you want them to. Maybe, you're 20 pounds overweight or, that cortisol belly is sticking around. Maybe you're in this cycle of comparing yourself to others or you're stuck in that cycle of negative self-talk, right? Like this happens so often, especially when stress is high and, your self-care, your healthy habits, they end up taking a back seat. So can you talk a little bit about how, if you're feeling this way, you would use the two column tool and the ownership shift with something that feels like more personal?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this example up because this is a big one for busy women. And yes, your weight, how your clothes fit, your body image, all of those things might feel like they're things that you can control and that can make you spiral when you wake up and have one of those days where you feel ugly or you feel fat or just giving yourself that mental beat down every single morning. But get out of your head and use these tools that we're giving you. Okay, so again, pull out that two column tool. Can you instantly change your body overnight? No, you cannot. You can't snap your fingers and suddenly get rid of your tummy, right? You can't snap your fingers and put on muscle to look more toned. You can't snap your fingers and get rid of the puffiness that's in your face. Okay, so unfortunately, those things go straight into the cannot control column. But let's now bring in the ownership shift. Okay, when you do ask yourself that question, what can I do about this right now? Your focus changes. You can choose to speak more kindly to yourself. You can fuel your body with healthier food, and you can move in ways that feel good, right? Not for punishing, not because like you're beating yourself down and so you're forcing yourself to work out. You're moving because it actually genuinely feels good for you, right? Like you can buy clothes that fit more comfortably and that make you feel more confident. You can unfollow or mute social media accounts that trigger comparison. Okay? So do you see how it all just comes down to taking action from a place of self care rather than self criticism? When you focus on what you can do in any scenario, you will naturally feel more empowered and less stuck.
This is so good. Like, that is the goal for all of us, especially people who are struggling with chronic stress, struggling with high cortisol. It does make you a lot of times feel like you are helpless. Like there's no options. Like you're just kind of in this victim mode, like I talked about earlier. But if we can shift that focus to, empowerment, to feeling like I am making progress, that's all done by taking action, right? So this is so good. We have our first two tools, the two columns and the ownership shift. And you know now that if you start using these tools, you're going to actively be able to, to identify what is out of your hands and then shift your focus to the actions that you can take, right? It's kind of like shifting from panic mode into planning mode. You're giving your thinking brain, not your panic, your stressy, your emotional brain, you're giving your thinking brain the steering wheel, right? Jesus, take the wheel. Like that part of you that actually helps problem solve and make decisions, right? That's the part that we want in control, not the one that's kind of, I think of the scene in The Office where like they're like fire and they're all running around and like trying to throw chairs at the window. Like that's not how you want your brain to be. You want to be in problem solve decision making mode, okay? If you even just look at the three examples that we just shared, right? About the layoffs, about your spouse and how they show up, and about like your body image, I'm sure you can already feel the difference, right? When you switch into ownership mode, it feels different. It feels more empowering just listening to it, right? Living that way, even thinking that way, it helps you feel lighter. It helps you feel, like you have agency. You're not stuck in that, Eeyore mode waiting for the next rain cloud to show up. Like you're choosing actively how you get to respond.
Exactly. And here's the thing, when you finally stop obsessing over things that you cannot change, you free up so much mental space. But if you don't redirect that energy, it's easy for your brain to drift right back to worry mode. So where do you put all that energy instead? Right? Like how do you make sure it actually is working for you? And that's where intentional focus comes in. So instead of letting your mind default to stress, you ask yourself, what's one small action I can take today that supports my goals, my peace, or my happiness? And
Hmm.
this brings us to the final tool for your toolkit, the daily reset. So every morning, I want you to take just 1 minute to ask yourself, where do I want to focus my energy today? And this doesn't have to be part of some elaborate morning routine where you make a matcha latte and light candles and you write a 3-page journal entry. You can literally do this while lying in bed, while making coffee, like while doing anything, right? Before you reach for your phone, just pause and set an intention. Okay. So, a few examples of what this might look like could be, if you're feeling overwhelmed at work, well, your daily reset might be, okay, today I'm going to focus on finishing just one important task instead of stressing about my whole to-do list. Like that one looming task that like, I'm sure like you just know as soon as I said that, like that's the task. Okay, that's the task that you need to go focus on and like screw everything else. Okay. If we're talking about your personal life and maybe your personal life feels a little bit messy right now, your daily reset might be, I'm going to have one honest conversation today instead of holding it all in. Okay. Let it go. If you're feeling low on energy, your reset might sound like, I'm going to drink 100 ounces of water and make two, and take two short breaks today to get outside and get some fresh air no matter how busy I get. I'm going to make it a priority. Okay? So, I want you to think of your energy like the battery on your phone. Every morning you wake up with a fully charged battery. Okay? But if you don't decide what apps to spend it on, your brain will automatically open up every single app that's on the phone, and it's going to drain you really, really fast. Okay. It's like having every app on your phone running in the background without realizing it. So by noon, the phone will be dead, right? But you won't be dead. You're going to be mentally exhausted, even if nothing major happened. So I want you to think of this daily reset like closing out all of like the background apps that you don't need and deciding on what you're going to open, what your battery will go to. And when you take 1 minute in the morning to just ask yourself that question, where do I want to focus my energy today? It's like saying I'm putting 40% into work, but only on the tasks that actually matter. I'm saving 30% for my family, so I'm not going to check any emails after dinner tonight. I'm keeping 20% for myself, whether that's, a quick workout or a walk or just to sit in quiet and breathe a little bit. Okay? Without the intentional daily reset, your battery will drain on stress because that has been your default for so long. With the daily reset, you are in control of where your energy goes. And again, it's just really so empowering.
This is so good. I mean, when you put it in those terms of thinking, like, I think of my phone, I charge it every night. And yeah, by the time noon happens, like noon rolls around, I've already opened up a bunch of apps. They're all running in the background. And by noon, I usually have to charge my phone. That's exactly what's happening with us, right? Like, if we don't decide where we're directing our energy, if our default has always been stress and worry and anxiety and overthinking, well, our brain gravitates towards what's known and what's comfortable, right? So just on autopilot, all of your energy is going to continue to get directed to the stress and the worry and the overthinking and the anxiety instead of what you said, being intentional around where you're actually going to direct your energy for the day. So I love that. This was a great episode. I think I wish that I had listened to something like this, a couple of years ago. Just doing a quick recap, if you are like I was and like Melissa was, and you're stressed and you're anxious and you're worrying and you're constantly, trying to grip so tight to all of these things outside of your control. Now you have a game plan, right? You're going to start with the reality check with the two columns, right? So, whatever you're stressing about, you're going to ask yourself, is this within my control? Yes or no? If it's not, you're going to let it go and you're going to implement the opportunity shift, right? So, that's where you're going to stop focusing on the problem and start focusing on what you actually can do. Once you get rid of all of the stress and the worry and you're in action taking mode, like Melissa said, you're going to have all of this like extra mental space, extra mental energy. So, with all of that extra mental energy, you need to be intentional about directing it, right? Every day you get to choose where your energy goes, or the day is going to choose it for you, right? It all sounds so simple, guys, but remember, it's these small daily actions that you're going to do every day that you implement the two column, the two column rule, the ownership shift, the daily reset. Every single day that you do those small daily actions, that's what's going to lead to the big shifts for you over time. Okay. And I want you to also remember, give yourself grace because this is a practice. You're not going to wake up tomorrow. And like Melissa said, you listen to one podcast episode and you're like, oh, well, I magically don't stress about things that I can't control anymore. Right. But I want you to remember that every time that you make the choice to shift your focus, well, you're again, activating that RAS, the reticular activating system, and you are rewiring your brain for more peace, more like chill feelings and less stress, right? And like we love that for you. That's what we want for you.
I love it. Well, that is all we got for today. And if this episode hit home for you, do us a favor and send this to a friend or to your coworker who needs to hear this, or share it to your story and tag us in it. And as always, if you're loving this podcast, make sure to hit follow and leave us a 5-star review. It helps more women like you find us and break up with stress for good.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'll see you next time on the Stress Sisters podcast.